If you're new to playing piano, or maybe you're picking it back up after years of being away, there are some things that I wish that people had told me when I first began my own piano journey. In this video, I'm going to be teaching you 20 of the lessons that I wish I had learned. I had to learn the hard way so that you don't have to. If you stick with me to the end of the video, I'll share with you my number one tip that I have learned that has transformed my playing. It has allowed me to play piano and make beautiful music every single time I sit down at the piano without having any music in front of me. Number one, I learned that you do not have to be a serious musician in order to make beautiful music every single time you sit down at the piano. When I was in college, I was surrounded by amazing musicians, and I just felt a little bit out of place because classical music was not my forte. It's something that I had to work really hard in order to play and to sing, and it just wasn't something that excited me like all the other serious musicians around me. I almost felt like a fraud, and it wasn't until I grew older and started experimenting on the piano and realized I can make beautiful music too, even though I'm not necessarily the serious musician like everybody else. Number two, improvising on the piano is not just for people who've studied jazz. I have known some amazing jazz musicians in my life who have learned a lot about the piano and know far more than I do about playing jazz music. It is breathtaking to be able to listen to them improvise and make these amazing riffs every single time they play. But that simply wasn't me. I didn't study all of the jazz. I didn't have extra jazz classes. In fact, I never even took one jazz class. And I thought that that meant that I could not improvise on the piano just because I couldn't play jazz. It doesn't mean that I'm not going to continue learning and continue adding jazz chords and things like that to my improvisation. But it does not mean that I am not able to improvise and create beautiful music in my own right. Number three, scales have a purpose. In all of the years that I have been studying the piano, we always started out with scales. I learned them first in a five-finger position, then in one octave, two octaves, all the way up to four octaves. I would push my speed in both hands, and it was so boring, and I hated every second of learning my scales. They didn't have a purpose. But when I realized that scales were going to really enhance the way that I did improvisation, it changed the game for me. In order to do passing tones and how to play in all of the different keys, it also prepared my ear so that I would understand the keys before I start. That's why every single one of my videos begins with scales, because they have a purpose. It's not just for learning a skill that you feel like is not ever going to affect your playing. It really does help our improvisation, and it can be fun. Four, there's more to piano than learning how to read the notes on the page. Now, understand that I think that learning to read the notes on the page is very important. So we can understand rhythms, we can sight read, all of those things are going to greatly enhance our musicianship. However, just because you can't read the notes on the page yet doesn't mean that you can't make beautiful music. That is something that has truly transformed the way that I have learned to play. That every single time I practice, whether or not there's music in front of me, I can make beautiful music, and you can too. Five, the more you learn about piano improvisation, the easier it is to learn to sing and play and talk and play and perform. One of the skills that so many people have asked me to teach them how to do is how to play and sing at the same time. I'm a worship leader in my church. I absolutely love leading worship with the keyboard and vocally. And in order to do that, you have to understand piano improvisation. Even if you have a chord chart in front of you, you have to be able to learn how to fill in the chords and make it sound musical, and then be able to sing on top of that if that's something that's your desire. The more often that you're improvising in your own personal practice time, the easier that skill is going to be. And it's easier to perform that way as well because you could become more and more comfortable with learning that particular skill. Six, it does not have to be a complicated song in order to sound beautiful. It is really easy to think that in order to have a song be absolutely beautiful and breathtaking, it has to be complicated. It has to have complicated patterns in the left hand, in the right hand. Maybe it even has to be a complicated chord progression. So just because something is not complicated does not mean that it is not beautiful. 7, understanding how to play in different keys is vital to making improvisation interesting. Learning to play in different keys is something that a lot of beginners really struggle with. Learning to play in the key of C or A minor, which is only white notes, is really attractive because it's a lot easier than remembering all of the different black notes. But if you start using the circle of fifths tool, which I show you how to do in this video, it is really going to help you understand how the different keys on the piano work. And then you don't become bored because there are so many different keys to choose from, not only major keys, but minor keys. If you check out this playlist, I go through all of the different major keys in the circle of fifths, and you learn to improvise in every single one. So make sure that you are branching out and not just playing in the key of C major, because there's so many more amazing keys on the piano to try out. 8, playing with two hands is not hard. It just takes some practice. A lot of times beginners have a really hard time coordinating our hands. I mean, what other activities do we really do besides maybe typing, where our hands are doing individual things on their own? It's using both sides of your brain and both sides of your body. And so it can be really scary because it's not something that we do often. We're usually one hand dominant. I happen to be left-handed, but that doesn't mean that my right hand can't do wonderful things on the piano as well. It just takes some practice and some coordination. If you start out using two hands in an alternating pattern, left hand, then right hand, right hand, it becomes a lot easier to put both of those things together. It just takes some practice, and there are easy ways to do that. 9, the old adage of you can't teach an old dog new tricks is simply not true when it comes to music. Music is for everyone. In fact, when I turned 40, I realized that I wanted to get more lessons on the piano, and I went back and I took lessons for the first time in over 20 years. It was one of the most empowering things that I've ever done, and I continue to learn more about the piano. I know there are people who are more professional or who have played for a longer amount of time and they have more knowledge and skills than me. That will always be the case. But that doesn't mean that I can't still continue to learn, and you can too. It doesn't matter if you're in your retirement years, if you've never picked up an instrument or played piano, piano is for everyone. 10, piano improvisation can be a form of therapy. Mental health is a very complicated subject. Within my own family, there are various mental health issues that people have had to address. However, one tool that has been very helpful for me has been the piano. When I'm feeling especially frustrated and angry, one of the things that I love to do is come bang it out on the piano. Of course, not banging the keys, but I really do enjoy the end of the day therapy of sitting down and making beautiful music. Something about music washes over my whole brain and calms me down. The more I learn about improv, the more chord progressions that I try out, the more tools are at my disposal for that end of the day therapy. And if you haven't tried it, you need to give it a try today. 11, you may enjoy a certain kind of music that other people don't enjoy, and that's okay. For piano improvisation, I love soft lyrical melodies and chord progressions. I love major and minor keys, but I don't particularly love playing fast, complicated, using trills. I don't love playing classical music, and I don't love playing jazz and blues. And that's okay. It's really okay if you have a certain preference and you like to do one particular style on the piano. It doesn't make your style that you love better or worse than somebody else's. 12, metronomes are not scary. That is a very scary thing to say because most of my beginners who come in here are so afraid of the metronome. But what they can do for you is they can establish an inner beat and an inner rhythm that some people don't have naturally. And it can help you work on speed. If you want to work on transitions, using a metronome is going to be one of your best tools. So we're not going to be afraid of the metronome anymore because it is one of the best tools for playing the piano. 13, you don't have to practice hours a day in order to become a wonderful musician. You only have to make sure that your practice times are intentional. This is something that I learned as an adult. When I was a kid and practicing the piano, my parents made me sit down and play. And it was not a wonderful experience because I didn't want to be there. However, I am happy that they instilled in me the desire to become a better musician. When I became an adult, I started practicing for hours at a time, even though I didn't really have those hours to spend. And I realized that I actually was starting to hurt my hands, and it would hurt my brain too, because it became labor instead of an intentional time. When I started setting my intention of making beautiful music every time I sat down at the piano, it changed the way that I practiced. Then I felt like I was able to accomplish something even if I was working on a particularly difficult section that I was reading or a classical piece, something that was harder for me, it was the intentionality that helped me get through that practice time. Every time I felt like I walked away with a better attitude when I was only spending 20 minutes as opposed to hours and hours trying to get something done. 14. In order to be a good musician, you do need to have a good instrument. However, you do not need to spend thousands of dollars. What you really need is a keyboard that has 88 keys, whether that is a piano or an electric keyboard, and something that is weighted. Weighted keys are going to give you the proper pressure and it's going to allow you to make better sound. My keyboard that I've had a lot of people talk to me about it. It was actually a gift from my parents, but they had bought it refurbished. And so this is a refurbished weighted electric keyboard from the early 2000s. It has served me so well in my studio. When we have recitals, we're able to go to my church that has a grand piano, and it's a wonderful experience to be able to play on an instrument such as that. However, I do not have that in my own home studio, and I'm still able to make wonderful music and continue my musical education. 15. Noodling never made sense to me. However, once I realized that noodling on the piano simply means using different patterns and employing the notes of the scale, it changed the game. I get very frustrated when I see different people who are teaching about improvisation and they simply say to noodle in that particular key. That was such a nebulous concept for me until I started really breaking down what does noodling mean. Once you understand the patterns and what you're doing with your right hand, noodling becomes something that is achievable and it is really just a breakdown of different patterns in the keys. 16. Good posture is very important, along with good hand technique and learning to play correctly on the piano. I definitely found out this the hard way when I got a back injury and a wrist injury because I was having too much tension in my wrist and fingers when I was playing large things like octaves in my left hand, particularly. And every time I sat down at the piano, I was slunched over. And because of that, as I got older, it affected my body. So once I realized that good posture was the key to making my back not hurt and learning good technique, it helped me to be able to continue playing on for years to come. 17. Improvisation before sight reading a piece makes playing that piece so much easier. If you look at the key that a piece is written in and then improvise first, make up a chord progression, or if you are adept at seeing the different chords that are in the music, use that chord progression to improvise. All of a sudden, it's like your brain and your body respond to that. And when you go to actually sight read that piece or play that piece or practice that piece, it is going to be so much easier because your hands and your brain already know about that particular key. 18. When you're starting out, your left hand does not have to be complicated in order to still sound great. Whether you're playing just one note in your left hand or you have a whole chord progression, if you just play that one note in the different notes of the chord progression, it's going to sound great. You can gradually make it more complicated if you desire, but even if you just do an octave or one note or a chord, it doesn't matter. It's still going to sound wonderful with your right hand. 19. In order to create a good melody for your right hand, all you have to do is think of a song. When we're singing songs, we're working with patterns that are close by each other. They're usually within a step or two. You're not making big, huge leaps over the piano. And when you think of it like a song, can I sing this? Would this be nice in a song? You're automatically going to have a good melody. So you can just calm down about the melody part of it. If it's kind of within a hand's breadth of one another, within 4 or 5 notes, it's going to sound fantastic. And we're finally to the most important number 20. This is the most important thing that I have learned in my improvisational journey, and that is to not compare yourself to others. I know you've heard this 1,000 times, but it is true that comparison is the thief to joy. If you listen to somebody who's been improvising on the piano for years and years and years, it seems so easy. It also seems so beautiful and out of reach. But if you realize that you are able to do this even from the very beginning, you are able to sit down at the piano, make beautiful music every single time you sit down with whatever level you are at, all of a sudden, it's going to be very empowering for you. When I stopped comparing myself to classically trained pianists who had been playing for decades of their life, and I started focusing on my own musical journey, I began to grow in such amazing ways. And I hope that for you as well. If any of these things resonated with you, I hope that you will consider subscribing to my channel. This channel is for anybody who is learning to play the piano, not looking at sheet music. And remember, that's an important thing to do. We want to continue learning how to play the piano, both looking at music and sitting down. I release videos every week, and this is for any musician, so I hope to have you along on this journey. And comment below which one of these tips is the most important for you. Or are there any lessons that you have learned in your own musical journey? I would love to know. So please leave a comment below. Keep practicing. I can't wait to see you in the next video.